Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening po sa lahat. Welcome to our 150th episode of Stop COVID Deaths webinar series brought to you by the University of the Philippines. Thank you for being part of our credible online community, and to all those who have discovered us for today, welcome po at sana po marami po kayong matutunan sa ating webinar. Very interesting webinar for today. As the world grapples with the devastating consequences of climate change, sea level rise stands out as one of the most prominent and far-reaching challenges as part of it. The Philippines has observed a sea level rise of 60 centimeters, about 3 times that of the global average. And theoretically, it can be slowed down. However, there's no current evidence that says that it can really be reversed. But with 70% of the Philippine population living in the coastal areas, it's one of the most serious long-term climate change threats to our archipelago. So ang tanong po natin for today, why is the sea level rising? How does it happen? And will this be harmful to us? So sea level rises, they're due to increase in water volume, due to melting ice on land and water, as well as water expansion due to heating. And this result causes seawater inundation in coastal areas, shoreline erosion, coastal flooding, saltwater intrusion, and storm surge vulnerability. All of these have severe impacts on health and survival. And this is what we will be tackling for today's webinar. Dr. Raymond Francis Sarmiento, Director of National Telehealth Center, National Institutes of Health, University of the Philippines, Manila. Always a pleasure to be with all of you during our regular Friday. And also very special for today because my partner, Dr. Susie, who is also our adjunct research faculty and international renowned public health communications expert, as you saw in the poster, is our main presenter for today. Dr. Susie?
Hi, Raymond. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. Special greetings to Climate Change Commissioner Rachel Ann Herrera, who's with us today, and our very special speakers from the Climate Change Commission, National Panel of Technical Experts, and their respective universities. So, good afternoon to everyone who's with us in the Zoom. Also, those who are watching us on YouTube channel, the TVUP YouTube channel, the UP System Facebook page, TVUP Facebook page, Stop COVID Deaths Facebook page, and of course, all of those who are watching on TVUP channel 101. And also greetings to those who are watching on the playback. Raymond, we always have people who are not able to join us at noontime, but they watch on the playback. So welcome po sa inyong lahat. In this special episode of Stop COVID Deaths, we are making this the first policy forum of the National Panel of Technical Experts of the Climate Change Commission. So it's Stop COVID Deaths. This is our platform, but we are going to have a policy forum. And so mga kasama po natin, hindi po sila mga medical doctors, pero mga doctor po sila ng siyensya. Iba-iba, no? So you will hear from them later. Nothing but the best for Stop COVID Deaths from the University of the Philippines. And Raymond, ikaw na mag-introduce ng speakers, parang nahiya ako.
No problem, no problem. As mentioned po, no. But before I start with the speech, I'll reiterate, welcome po to Commissioner Rachel Ann Herrera of the Climate Change Commission. Thank you so much for joining us for our first National Policy Forum of the National Panel of Technical Experts. So our speakers, nothing but the best. First speaker will be Dr. Susie Pineda Mercado, who, as you know, is the Director on Food Systems and Resiliency at the Hawaii Public Health Institute, also serving as co-chair of the National Panel of Technical Experts po. Our next speakers are Dr. Nathan Ablibuyog, who serves as Vice President for Research and Extension at the Mariano Marcos State University, also a member of the NPTE, as well as Dr. Dr. Eduardo Mangawang, who serves as co-chair of the NPTE, and then Engineer Miriam Santillan, who is professor at the Department of Geodetic Engineering at Caraga State University, also a member of the NPTE. And as always, our synthesis and closing remarks to be delivered by the head of the PJ's Office of Expanded Education and Training, Dr. Stella Marie Jose. Dr. Susie?
Okay, so for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we started out talking about COVID. That's why the title of the program is Stop COVID Deaths. But as you can see, we have expanded our discussion. And this is probably, Raymond, the third or fourth time we've talked about climate change, not
Yes.
just as disaster, but as the context or the background for achieving better health for everybody. So we are really excited about today. Ako naman kinakabahan kasi mag-represent ako. Pero Raymond, meron tayong person on the street, no?
Yeah. But before that, Dr. Susie, I think we'll need to have the Climate Change Commission has sent in a video recording from none other than the Secretary of
From
the Climate Change
Secretary.
Commission.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Secretary Robert Borge. Go ahead, TVUP.
Our distinguished national panel of technical experts, our partners in the academe, members of the civil society organizations, esteemed guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant day to all. We are here today to discuss rising sea level, a phenomenon that the Philippines as an archipelagic country must understand in all its complexity. Sea level rise threatens our coastal communities and poses clear dangers to our economies, infrastructure, ecosystems, and natural resources. The recent synthesis report for the 6th Assessment Report, or AR6, of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change pointed to the alarming increase in average rate of sea level rise from 1.3 millimeter per year between 1901 and 1971 to 3.7 millimeter per year between 2016 and 2018. The IPCC identified human influence as the very likely main driver. This has dire implications for the Philippines and its low-lying coastal areas. The NPT identified sea level rise as one of the 10 climate-induced risks that our country faces. And understandably so, more than 60% of our population lives in coastal areas. And according to a joint study by DOST Pag-asa and the UK Meteorological Office, waters in the country are rising by 5 to 7 millimeters per year, more than twice the global average. Our forum today provides an important venue, bringing together the academe, the career service, NGOs, policymakers, and CSOs toward timely, transformative climate recommendations and actions. Our goal is to develop policies and initiatives generated by science and evidence-based common understanding of sea level rise, its drivers, impacts, and that which will enable our nation and communities to adapt and not only survive, but thrive. Already, the Climate Change Commission, guided by the National Panel of Technical Experts, has an ongoing adaptation case-building study in Pampanga. The municipality of Masantol is noted to experience an increasing trend in sea level rise. The pilot study aims to generate and analyze climate data and information for risk and science-based policy formulation that will enable the community to transform and make itself resilient and smart against sea level rise. But of course, we want to do more. Throughout the course of this forum, we rely on your insightful discussions on various aspects of sea level rise, its causes, projections, and multidimensional impacts on our ecosystems, economy, and society. Why? Because what is at stake? Our lives, livelihood, and our common future. Sa usaping climate change, buhay, kabuhayan, at kinabukasan nating lahat ang nakataya. We have made this very clear here at the ongoing 58th session of Subsidiary Bodies on Climate Change, or SB58, in Bonn, Germany, where the Philippine delegation emphasized strongly the need for urgent and transformative climate action through the delivery of capacity building, technology development and transfer, and climate finance to developing countries that suffer the most but are least responsible for climate change. We have made it clear that we cannot continue to be bearing the brunt of the loss and damage due to climate change. We have likewise made it very clear that under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the Philippine government is ready, willing, and able to do its part to address this global, systemic, and historic governance challenge of our generation. To do this, we require a whole-of-world, a whole-of-government, and a whole-of-society approach. And this is where each and every one of you matters. Your input individually and collectively will help support our policy-making process, ensuring that through this inclusive approach, the Philippines can move from fragility to resiliency and agility. We need our policies and projects to be guided by best available science and informed by best practices and lessons learned. We need to work together to ensure that what rise before our eyes are not sea levels, but climate-smart, resilient, and thriving communities. This is our challenge. I enjoin everyone to foster an atmosphere of and harness the power of open dialogue, respect, and collaboration. And together, let us do it and make it right for our nation. In closing, allow me on behalf of the Climate Change Commission to thank our NPTE and our partners for organizing this forum. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay kayo. Mabuhay po ang Pilipinas. Mabuhay ang Pilipino.
Uy, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sec. Borja. Secretary cannot be with us today kasi I think he's attending a very important climate change meeting.
Correct.
But salamat po sa sa message, the inspiration and all the support that you've been giving the NPTE, and of course all your work for our country. Thank you very much po. Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Borja. Thank you, Dr. Susie. So now we'll be moving on to our what we call person on the street videos, just to set our discussion into context and for the benefit of those who are joining us for the very first time. We have this what we call just to take the pulse of the common folks on the street. On the webinar topic, we pose several questions to them, and the questions for today's webinar are as follows. Have you heard about sea level rise? What does it mean to you? Should we be concerned about sea level rise? And what could happen if the sea level rises? Please watch this.
Hello, ako po si Candice Mungaya, isang development worker na nagtatrabaho at tumututok po sa pag-protect ng ating karagatan at karapatan ng ating mga maliit na prangkista.
Ako po ay Integrated Pharmacy Chairman ng Sabelans, isa pong alliance ng LGU dito sa amin sa Northern Samar, particularly po sa FMA 7.
And I am the IEC assistant of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources here in Caraga region.
At matagal po nang naririnig yung tungkol sa sea level rise sa iba't ibang usapin, lalo na sa development at sa usapin din sa media.
Ay, upo, maraming beses ko na pong narinig yung sea level rise, lalo na po pag may mga gatherings ng mga leaders. Ito po yung pagtaas ng tubig dagat dahil po sa, sabi na nila, ay sa pagbabago ng klima o yung climate change. Dahil sa global warming na nagdudulot ng pagkatunaw daw ng mga yelo doon sa North Pole na nagdadagdag sa katubigan ng ating karagatan.
I already heard about sea level rise because it has been one of the topics during my bachelor's degree course. Sea level rise is the occurrence wherein there is a rise in the seawater, mainly because of global warming.
Bilang isang development worker, ang pagkakaintindi ko sa sea level rise ay ito nga ay pagtaas ng ating tides dahil sa is one of the effects ng climate change. At what this means to me personally is this will bring stronger typhoons. This will also displace yung ating mga coastal communities na posibleng maapektuhan ng malakas na bagyo, especially ng mga storms.
Yun pong biglang makikita mo na lang, sobrang taas ng tubig, na yung dating mga kabahayan ay inaabot na ng tubig alat, nawawala na yung ibang mga mga lugar na yung pinapangisdaan dati na kaya lang abutin ng mga malilit na mangingisda ay sobrang lalim na po. Kaya medyo nahihirapan. At sabi ng iba, yung nagkakaroon daw ng migration, yung mga isda na dating nandyan ay nawawala na.
Yes, we should be very concerned about sea level rise kasi ito nga ay isa sa mga very visible at damaging impact ng climate change. And again, this will result to the displacement of communities, and this will also negatively impact yung ating food security, especially access to fisheries resources.
It should be a concern because we humans are inhabiting Earth, and if sea level rise occur, so we humans are the main or the primary people, or aside from plants also, tayo po yung mga mas maapektuhan
Yes,
ito.
we should. Dapat noon pa dapat na anticipate na ito. Dahil malaki po yung ito epekto. Hindi lang po sa mga, pero lahat po ng komunidad na nasa paligid ng dagat o nasa coastal ay apektado po talaga. Marami pong nawawalan ng kabahayan at marami pong kabuhayan ang naapektuhan na rin. Kaya medyo papahirap po yung ating mga malilit na mangingisda, lalo na yung nasa coastal communities.
It's alarming is an understatement, no? Kasi for the past decade or so, we already saw na parang lumulubog dahil sa sea level rise. So itong mga impacts na ito, we can say that it's very alarming, and nakikita at ramdam na yung epekto na ito ng mga tao, especially sa ating mga coastal communities.
Thank you so much, TVUP, for those interviews from Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. Great to hear such a high level of awareness for sea level rise. And I think we're going to hear more from our speakers, but thank you so much, TVUP. Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, TVUP, for our person on the street video, and thank you also, Dr. Susie. Just before we delve into the webinar proper po, just a little bit of housekeeping for us. For those who are asking, certificates of attendance have already been given out for our 149 episodes. You will be eligible to receive a certificate if you watch at least 50% of the webinar duration. If you have any questions, please let us know by emailing us at stopcoviddeps@up.edu.ph. And for our webinar for today, we will have our standard panel discussion format after our speakers have presented. That will be followed by a Q&A session. But before that, before we delve into our webinar proper, we'll have our very short but very cute introduction to our fun quiz segment for today.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Kumusta na kayo lahat?
Hi, I'm Doc Susie, the mini Doc Susie.
And I'm Doc Radar, the mini Doc Raymond. Are you ready to have fun? Simply open your browser to www.slido.com and enter your code to participate. We will discuss your answers during the panel discussion later on in the program.
We will have it flashing on your screen in a bit, and we look forward to your answers. Masaya at madali lang ito. Join na!
Something new.
Bagay yata, bagay sa topic yung nagiging isda tayo. Parang cute yata yun.
Thank you so much, TVUP. Can we have on the screen our Zoom poll as well as yung sa Slido po natin?
Parang Little Mermaid ka doon, Raymond.
Something new, but something very, very timely and apt for our webinar for today. If we could have the Slido on the screen, thank you so much. For those who are outside of the Zoom, we have what is our Slido po, no? What it means is that you'll be able to participate still in our fun quiz. If you open up your browsers, type in slido.com dun po sa address bar and enter the code 6510096 when you're prompted. That's 6510096 for you to be able to participate in our fun quiz. There are 3 questions for today, and we hope will be able to get the correct answers towards the end of our webinar. At sana po lahat po kayo ay makinig sa ating very interesting webinar for today. For our first question for today, is the sea level rise in the Philippines higher than the rest of the world or is it lower po? Okay, medyo madali lang po ito. So pipilian nyo lang po, is it A, higher, B, lower, or is it C, the same? We'd like to take this opportunity to greet those who are joining us all the way from Candelaria in Calabarzon region, from the Climate Change Commission in Marikina City in NCR, from the Provincial Government of Marinduque in BOA, from the Office of Civil Defense in Pasay City, and from Tayabas, Quezon in Calabarzon po. There are those who are joining us from UPPGH Ward 1 Medicine, from MDRRMO Castillejos in Zambales, those from Bataan, thank you so much, from UP Los Baños, Zamboanga City, of course, we have those joining us from the Climate Change Commission, from MMG San Jose Occidental Mindoro, from Catanduanes State University, maraming salamat po, from Corazon Locsin Montelibano Memorial Regional Hospital, thank you so much for joining us, from NEUST, from Rizal Medical Center, from Ifugao, from our regulars po, all the way from Cavite, from Iloilo, from RPHS Annex 1 in Antipolo, thank you so much. University of San Agustin in Iloilo City, maraming salamat din po. From Taguig, malapit lang po sa NCR, from Rizal, Caraga State University, thank you so much. And to all those who are joining us from from international, mamaya na po ito, but University of Rizal Rizal System Health Services who are joining us for today. Deca Homes, Loma de Gato in Marilao, Bulacan. Maraming salamat po. There are those also pahabol from Pampanga, from PGH Eros, which is yung po sa health research po ng ating PGH, from Araneta City, representing Jerry Rojas Foundation, from UP Diliman, from LCP Pathology Department, I think that's Lung Center of the Philippines, from PDRRMO Nueva Ecija, from the Office of Civil Defense in Region 3. Thank you so much. And then from Bulacan Agricultural State College at San Ildefonso in Bulacan. For question number 2, sea level rise. Hope we could get the Slido fix very soon. Question number 2, sea level rise can be, number 1, it can be reversed, letter A. Letter B, it can be slowed down. Or letter C, is likely to be irreversible. So obviously, you all know that we are live stream being watched po live, and not just in the Philippines but internationally. So we'd like to greet those who are joining us from Stockton, California, from Algeria, from the Canadian Medical Center in Dammam, Saudi Arabia, from University of Hail in Hail Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, from Bangkok, Thailand, Island Hospital in Penang, Malaysia, from the UP International Nursing and Healthcare Forum in Lexington, Kentucky, in the United States. Maraming salamat po. Okay? So if Slido is okay, please please show it on the screen. And then for question number 3, last question, what percentage of the Philippine population lives along coastlines? Is it letter A 25, letter B 35, letter C 70%, or letter D 80%? So we will not be closing din po, and we encourage everyone to participate in our fun quiz. Marami po kayong maaalala sa webinar na ito if you participate in our fun quiz for today. And I know everyone is very excited to get this discussion underway. So let me introduce our very first speaker. So you already know her since she's with us every week. But for today, she will be tackling this topic as in her role as co-chair of the National Panel of Technical Experts of the Climate Change Commission of the Philippines, as well as helping out in her role as Director on Food Systems and Resiliency at the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Please welcome as our first speaker, Dr. Susie Pinedo Mercado. Dr. Susie.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And actually, my colleagues are not the actors; they have their own presentation.
Yeah.
So let me start. Let me see. Okay. Nervous ako pagka-presenter. Sige, share screen. Okay, tama ba to, Raymond?
Ito, malapit na. Yan, okay.
Can
There
you
we
see?
go.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. This is our first policy forum as the National Panel of Technical Experts. And I thought a lot about it because one can jump and talk about policy right away, but let's start with some basic information about sea level rise. And I'm sure my colleagues will be giving you more concrete examples. And our title is Rising Sea Levels. Kapag tumaas ang dagat, malulunod ba tayo? Will we drown? No? Malulunod ba tayo? Okay. Yun ang tanong, malulunod ba tayo? Ganun ba kataas yung tubig? Let's look at drowning. No? This is one of the areas of work when I was at the World Health Organization was to look at injuries and to look at different kinds of injuries, including drowning. And I just looked at the data. 10 Filipinos die every day from drowning. And hindi pa ganun kataas yung sea level rise natin, ha? Ganyan kadami na yung namamatay dahil nalulunod sila. In fact, during Holy Week, 72 people died. I saw it in the news. 72 people died. There were people who were drinking, and dahil nalasing sila, ewan ko, siguro nagbe-beach sila, they were at the beach, nalunod sila. There were also children and families who died at the beach because they didn't realize na biglang malalim na yung tubig, no? So, children are the most vulnerable when it comes to drowning. And WHO in the Philippines has reported that among the children from ages 1 to 4 years old, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's the 6th cause of death among young children. And as you can see here, these are the ages of the children who die from drowning. Yung mga maliliit talaga, no, yung 1 to 4, tsaka itong 5 to 9, no, you can see that they constitute the majority of those who drown. So we haven't really talked about that a lot in terms of climate change and health, but children are going to be victims of sea level rise because, at age 1 to 4, you may not be able to swim if you fall into the water. There are, of course, children who are taught to swim at a younger age, but this is really a risk for kids. Okay. So Secretary said 60% of Filipinos, some estimate that 70% of the Filipinos live in proximity to a coastline. And this is from Manila Bay. You can see that there is no coastline. People are already living on top of the water. We have the 4th longest coastline in the world, and it is even longer than the coastline of the United States. So I think as a country, we really have to be, what should I say, prepared. We should be alarmed. That was a word that was used by one of the persons on the street. And we have to take urgent action. So I am going to talk about policy a little bit, but I think the danger is really so great. And yet we are not focusing on it, or we're not paying attention to what's happening. So sea level rise is 60 centimeters or about 2 feet. Isipin yung taas na yan na 2 feet. And it's 3 times that of the global average. In some years, it's 4 times. Some years, it's more than 2 times. But the data I have says that it's 3 times that of the global average. So in some places, and if you go to YouTube, you look for sea level rise Philippines, you will see videos of people who are living in a house that's underwater. At nakataas lahat yung mga appliance nila, lahat yung mga gamit nila nakataas kasi lubog na talaga yung bahay nila, no? So we don't see that a lot, but just go online and look, and it is really quite what should I say, quite appalling to see what is happening in some parts of the country. Now, people tend to think about coastal communities as rural, right? Now we think about people who are living on the coast are living beside the coconut trees and nasa kubo and all of that. But actually, those that are going to be most affected by sea level rise are in urban centers. And that's why the way we plan our cities and where we put our cities is going to be very important in the next few years. We should stop building close to the coast kasi alam na natin na tumataas yung dagat, no? That the sea level is rising all over the country. We have to find a way, and I think, this issue of reclamation should be completely stopped, no? Because these are the areas that are going to go underwater. So I think I'm going to show you a short video that I picked up about cities. This is just a few seconds.
Sprawling coastal cities in South and Southeast Asia are sinking faster than elsewhere in the world, leaving millions of people more vulnerable to rising sea levels. According to a research conducted by Singapore's Nanyang Technological University, many of these fast subsiding coastal cities are rapidly expanding megacities, where high demand for groundwater extraction and loading from densely constructed building structures contribute to local land subsidence or sinking. The researchers note those sinking cities are not of themselves a result of climate change. Their work would give a better insight into how the phenomenon would compound the effects of climate-driven sea level rise.
Okay, so that's just telling us that the problem is not just sea level rise. It's the way we are constructing our cities, how populated our cities are, and our inability to plan properly. Some countries have actually moved their capitals away from coastal areas. They have already done that. So we have to think about this really well, no? Because it is not something that we can do, overnight, but it really requires a commitment to long-term planning of development in our country. All right, so what causes sea level rise? So I just wanted to share this photograph because I thought this vector, because I thought it was very interesting. So you have, with the use of fossil fuels, the Earth, the atmosphere, or the cryosphere, where you have all your ice, becomes warmer. And because it gets warmer, then the ice caps melt. So everybody mentioned that, right? And so you can have lakes that are made out of ice. You can have sea ice that's floating. You see some of those photographs with a polar bear on top of it. You can have icebergs and ice shelves, and snow and ice sheets. But that is not the only reason. The melting of the ice caps is not the only reason why the sea is rising. The other reason why the sea is rising is because when the water is warmer, it expands. So the molecules of water disperse. And so sea level rise is caused both by melting of the ice caps and the expansion of water. And both of this is due to global warming. Now, problem is, we've talked about this before, the world wants to keep surface temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, but by 2030, but it looks like we're already at 1.5 degrees centigrade. In the Philippines, we can all feel how hot it is. Now, it's like never been this hot before. And so if this worsens, try to think about what happens 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, if it's this hot. So I think we really have to do something about climate, but this is just going back to sea level rise. You have two reasons why the sea level is rising. Okay, now, sea level rise is called a slow onset event. And I think our colleagues, Ed, will probably talk about this, which includes increasing temperature, desertification, loss of biodiversity, land and forest degradation, glacial retreat, sea level rise, ocean acidification, and salinization. I think our experts will talk about this a little bit more, but I wanted to focus on slow onset events, those words, SOE, because climate change is not just about sudden disruptions. Now, o lumalakas ang bagyo, yun ang climate change. No. There are many things that are going on in our environment that we're not even noticing. Ito yung tinatawag nating slow onset events. And that's why we thought, okay, we want to do this policy forum on a slow onset event like sea level rise because people don't notice it. Hindi na nahahalata. In fact, yung mga nakatira na sa bahay ng baha, hindi na nila napapansin yun. Parang naging way of life na nila yun, ano? Okay. So what are the risks to health? Now, I think my main job in this forum is to talk about how should we think about climate change and health, because this is a health platform, Stop COVID Deaths. So one of the very useful frameworks that we have used in environmental health is called the DIPSI model, which means driving forces, pressures, state, exposure, effects, and action. And just as an example of how you apply this, and this is so that we can delineate or we can identify where we can make an intervention. Because sometimes when we think about climate change, we think about sea level rise, ang laki-laking problema, parang sa laki ng problema, parang wala tayong magawa. That's not true, right? We have to just understand that we all have different roles to play in sea level rise. So using the DIPSI model, you can see the driving forces are fossil fuel use, governance, urbanization. That's why I wanted to show you that video about how cities are designed, unsustainable economic growth, population dynamics. Okay, those are driving forces. And there are policy imperatives for that. Napakataas na ng level na yan, no? And then the pressures are, of course, on the environment, increasing temperature, sea level rise, ocean acidification. So the particular state that we want to talk about is rising sea level. And the exposure to human beings is the following. So this is where, from a health point of view, we talk about how do you reduce the exposure or how do you reduce the risk of human beings to exposure to flooding, saltwater intrusion, parasites, especially if you're wading in water all the time, loss of livelihood, loss of food sources. And then what are the effects, the health effects? Those are kind of different, right? So I showed you drowning because we don't think about drowning as a problem related to climate change. But I'm telling you, this is going to be a very big problem because it already is a leading cause of death of children aged 1 to 4. So skin diseases, mental anguish, hypertension because of saltwater intrusion, malnutrition. So what is the action that is needed? If we're thinking about in the health sector, right? If we're thinking about flooding, saltwater intrusion, and these kinds of problems, no? Drowning, mental health issues, hypertension, malnutrition, what should we be doing? What's our response? Should we be requiring everyone to learn how to swim? Should we be training everyone on how to save a person who's drowning? Should we be moving people and our health centers and hospitals away from the coastal areas? What do we really need to do here? So the question is always around the action. So I think we know there's a problem, but what are we going to do about it? That's the question. All right. So just a little bit about saltwater intrusion and climate adaptation. My colleague Renzo Ginto likes to talk about saltwater intrusion. I think he's in the audience. But anyway, as you can see, when you have higher sea level, so this is where you have sea level rise. And this is your typical well, all right? Your typical well does not hit the bottom of the bottom of the land, right? So it does not touch the salt water. But if you have high sea level and eroding coasts, then the well bottom, the salt water might go into the well, and that will cause you to be drinking salty water. And sometimes you can't taste that. It's just that there's more sodium in the water, there's salinization, but you don't realize that you are consuming more salty water. And in the Philippines, 1 out of 4 people have hypertension. So sea level rise and saltwater intrusion, particularly in areas that use deep wells for the source of their water, are really in trouble because you're going to see a lot more hypertension. So this is just one example. There are many examples. I won't talk about all of them, but just to say that this is the application of the deep sea model created by Bangladesh. So in their coastal zones, so they also identified driving forces. So they talked about salinity intrusion, pressures, pati shrimp cultivation, no? They identified that as a pressure, the state of drinking water scarcity and drinking water sodium, no? And then impacts on health, ito na yung effects, and what is the action? What do you need to do? So they've been talking about pond sand filters, rainwater harvesting, managed aquifer recharging, solar powered desalination, and reverse osmosis. So this is Bangladesh using the deep sea model and thinking through what do we need to do for human beings. Okay, so as we go on, okay, so let's go to the next, right? Now I'm going now into the last part of my presentation, which is what are the policy options that we have? All right. The three keywords are protect, accommodate, and retreat. And I think we've got a lot of laws on protection. I think the question is, to what extent are we able to enforce or implement this? So recently, Senator Lauren Legarda filed Senate Bill 1117, or the National Coastal Greenbelt Act of 2022. And this is really a coastal defense type of policy where she calls for a sort of multi-sectoral group that will identify the coastal zones and protect it through mangroves, through proper use, through proper waste disposal, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot needs to be done considering we have the fourth longest coastline in the world. So this is an important piece of policy that is under consideration right now. The question is, and I'll ask this question later, who's going to do it and how much is it going to cost, right? Now, in terms of accommodation, and I've shown this to the group before, we have to start designing our health centers in a different way. So this is a design from the Green Architects of the Philippines, where you can see the elevation, no, in areas na binabaha, elevated na. And then they have rainwater catchment areas for water that's needed in the health center. Okay. And then this is another example of a hospital where you have elevation again, so that it won't flood. And you can see the way you go up is through a slope. So walang hagdanan, no? So slope yung no, para madaling igalaw ang pasyente. Okay. All right. Now, I've talked about this before, and I think we really need to be very serious about this. In areas that are always underwater, we have to start thinking about permanent evacuation centers that are at a high level. And this is a design, again, by Green Architects Philippines, where they have a permanent evacuation center, and below that is a fish pond, so that you get to eat some fish. You're not eating sardinas na dilata all the time. Pwede kang may tilapia doon, pwede kang mag-aquaponics at magkaroon ng vertical gardening, may mga gulay, so that when people are displaced, and especially children, do not go into immediate malnutrition. Kasi sa mga bata, ganyan, you don't feed them in a week or two, their weight drops and you lose their developmental gains. No? All right, and of course, I would say the most critical one is the topic on easement. And I think one of our colleagues will talk about this, like how far away from the shore should we be building our communities? I think there's a recommendation that it should be 40 meters. Some are saying 100. So I think that's something that needs to be further discussed. So what are the policy issues that we need to address? Okay, governance. So who should be in charge of this? Problema kasi, ang daming agencies na kasali, pero ang pinaka-importante talaga yung local government. But our coastal areas cut across local governments, right? So one part, you cannot say that the coastline belongs only to Quezon. Di ba? Kadikit na niya yung yung Bicol region no? So we have to think about governance and being able to work across different agencies together to protect coastal areas. Can the Philippines undertake a 50-year plan? This kind of work requires long-term vision, political will, and commitment. I've been involved in some of the research that's being done on the port of Honolulu here in Hawaii, and we are looking at a 50-year plan because in 50 years is the start of inundation of the port of Honolulu, and it is the only port where food comes in. So pag nasira yung port na yan, walang pagkain dito sa Hawaii because 90% of the food is imported. Dapat ganyan na yung pag-iisip natin. 50 years from now, ano bang itsura nito? So we need to use science for that. Hindi yung tinitingnan lang natin every election. We have to really have some kind of consistency in addressing climate change because it requires system change that's strategic and that's long-term. What kind of investment is needed? How much do we need to spend on this? Can we afford it? Of course we can afford it. We cannot not afford it. No, because, again, I was trying to download one of those maps on YouTube, which shows you year by year how small our land area becomes every 10 years. And it almost disappears after a while. So I think we need to really think about how we're going to support this. What will be the appropriate distance for easement by area? Maybe it's not the same in all parts of the country, but this is something that we have to discover through science. What new emergencies does the health sector need to prepare for? I was looking at those videos on the 72 people who drowned during Holy Week. I could see none of them knew what to do in terms of first aid for drowning. So, some of the stories were buhay pa nung nakuha sa tubig, pero patay na pagdating sa ospital. So, it sounds like, oh, that's not gonna happen. But it's already happening. What new regulations are needed for communities, homes, schools, hospitals? How will we meet our needs for water? I think, kakibat nitong sea level rise, we have to think about water because of saltwater intrusion. And that has very serious effects on health. Anyway, this is my grandson. He's very cute. His name is Marcos Alvarez, and he's now 8 years old. This picture was taken when he was 8. And sometimes when I think about it, he will be 85 years old in the year 2100. And some people are saying that the increase in surface temperature by 2100 could be 3 or 4 degrees. I don't know if he will just tell his own grandchildren about mangoes and playing in the beach. I don't know what kind of world my grandchildren are going to inherit. So I'm doing everything I can. I really believe in this. And I don't want my grandchildren to say that I didn't even try. So we all have to try to do something. It looks hard. It looks big, but we all have to try. Thank you very much. Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susie. Okay yung deep sea, that framework and model that very helpful. Hopefully that's something that we can adapt here in the Philippines. I also did not know that we have the 4th longest coastline. Very, very important in the world. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Susie. Next up, but before we call in our second speaker, I'd like to encourage everyone to put in our comment section in Facebook or in YouTube or here in the Q&A section of the Zoom for us to be able to select which questions we'll be able to answer during our Q&A session later for today. our next speaker who will be presenting, also a member of the NPTE. So you all know NPTE stands for the National Panel of Technical Experts. He is the Vice President for Research and Extension at Mariano Marcos State University. So please welcome to our webinar for the very first time, Dr. Nathaniel Alibuyog. Dr. Nathan. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Raymond. Magandang tanghali po sa atin lahat. Today, I will be discussing or presenting the trends of sea level rise in the Philippines. So maganda yung nasabi na ni Ma'am Susie kanina because he have presented most of my slides already. So sea level rise is a significant global concern due to its potential impact on coastal communities, to our ecosystems, and even to our infrastructures. So specifically, these presentations, I will be presenting the current state of sea level rise in the Philippines, and probably I will also be discussing some potential impacts to our community and to our country in general. So global sea level rise is primarily caused by the warming of the planet that leads to thermal expansion of the ocean, as presented by Ma'am Susie, and the melting of ice caps and glaciers. And it was reported that the global mean sea level has risen approximately around 210 to 240 millimeter since 1880. With about a third coming in just the last 2.5 decades. The rate of sea level rise is around 2.3 millimeter per year between 1971 and 2018. And since 1993, the recorded sea level rise is about 98.5 millimeters. And it was noted that the annual sea level rise has accelerated to about 3.7 millimeter per year during the year 2006 to 2018. And what is worse, the projection shows that the global mean sea level rise will continue to increase until at least in the 21st or 2100s by about 2 meters. But how about in the Philippines? So the sea level rise in the Philippines has been also observed to have significant rise in sea levels, measuring about 60 centimeters, which is approximately 3 times the global average. The sea level rise in the vicinity of the Philippines is estimated to be about 14.7 millimeter per year. And this rate is higher, again, than the global average, which is only 3.7 millimeter per year, indicating that the country's increased vulnerability to impacts of sea level rise. Hence, just like Ma'am Susie have said, we need some proactive measures and adaptation strategies to mitigate the effects of sea level rise and protect the vulnerable coastal communities in the Philippines. So sabi nga, tayo yung pinakamahaba. We are the port having the longest shorelines. Okay, so napaka-importante that we need to really protect this our assets here. And more recently, it is estimated that more than 60 or around 70% of the 110 million populations of the Philippines live in coastal areas. And based on some simulation done, it is estimated that at 1 meter sea level rise, about 7,000 square kilometers in 2,490 barangays will be inundated, affecting about 1.8 million Filipinos. And at the higher estimate of sea level rise, which is 2 meter, it would affect nearly 8,000 square kilometers in 2,730 barangays, impacting an estimated of 2.3 million people. More worse is at 3-meter sea level rise, which will affect around 3.4 million Filipinos. So napakabigat itong sea level rise sa atin. And if we're going to look at who are the most affected, we could see here that it is the urban poor communities that are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise. These are the people who often have limited resources and capacity to take measures to protect themselves. So itong mga pictures ito, nakuha ko nung punta kami sa Malolos, Bulacan, wherein we look at how we're going to make some interventions para naman sila po ay matulungan. And with that, makita natin yung mga key impacts of sea level rise. Okay, so first, I would like to emphasize that the impacts of sea level rise will vary by location and depend on a range of biophysical characteristics and socioeconomic factors, including human response. Kaya with this, hindi talaga blanket solution yung mabibigay natin, but it should be location specific. Yung for instance, dun sa setback, it may not be always 40 meters, but it should depend depending on the locations kung ano yung kalagayan nila doon. And primarily, yung impacts ng sea level rise are both physical changes to the environment. And these changes will in turn affect yung human uses of the coast, such as tourism, settlements, shipping, commercial, recreation, fishing, even agriculture and wildlife would be affected by this, as shown yung deep sea na framework ni Ma'am Susie kanina. And the most serious physical impacts of the gradual sea level rise and coastal lowlands include yung inundations and displacement of our wetlands and lowlands. Okay. It also includes yung coastal erosions and the increased vulnerability to coastal storms, damages, and flooding. So because of climate change, talagang nagiging mas intense yung ating storm surge, which really affect yung ating mga coastal communities and also affect yung ating infrastructures. Also, because of sea level rise, there is also a threat of increased salinity of areas due to saltwater intrusions. Impact dito sa Ilocos, we have observed salt water intrusions in many areas because of our extensive pumping of groundwater. Kaya talagang na-induce yung salt water, and even in some studies in Metro Manila, because of the intensive extractions of groundwater, yan po yung one of the reasons why Metro Manila ay nagsisink. Okay? And that contributes yung pag-angat ng sea level rise or inundations of many areas, low-lying areas. And of course, nandiyan din yung overall, yung impact nito is the increased exposures of our urban poor communities to flood-related diseases and pathogens. So we can say, are we ready to face the threats? Okay, our coastal defense infrastructure ready? So these are some photographs, because I've also been undertaking some projects funded by the Department of Science and Technology to look at coastal erosions and to look at our coastal infrastructures. Okay, we are looking some best practices, how we're going to really build our structures as a defense to storm surge and even tsunami and storm surge. Okay, so it's in here, it is likely that our coastal structures, which are considered as our primary defense, are not yet ready to withstand the more likely occurrences of more and more intense storm surge. So we need to start. Okay, we need to start preparing the worst impacts of sea level rise and mitigate climate change in general. So as a takeaway, here are some of my recommended actions. So the Philippines has to implement various policy adaptation strategies, both at the national, and even at the local level. Okay, and we need to also make our own climate change adaptations and resilience programs. Again, it should be cascaded to the local level. And we have to strengthen in the implementations of coastal zoning regulations to manage land use in vulnerable areas. And there's also a need to review existing guidelines, policies, and even design standards of structures, especially on the especially coastal structures. And of course, being at the academy, we really need to invest more on coastal environment research and development, such that we'll be able to come up with solutions to mitigate the impact of climate change and to help our vulnerable communities living in the coast. So with that, thank you, and maraming pong magandang araw po sa atin lahat.
Okay, maraming salamat po. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nathan Alibuyog, who's also a member of the National Panel of Technical Experts. Very well said in terms of the trends po, no? And something, hopefully we'll be able to come up with a policy paper based on all of the called recommendations from this webinar, sir. Thank you, and we'll call you again during our Q&A session, Dr. Alibuyog. For our next speaker, he is none other than the co-chair of the National Panel of Technical Experts for Climate Change of the Climate Change Commission from Visayas State University. Let's call on Dr. Eduardo Mangawang. Sir Ed, go ahead, sir.
Yep. Okay. Naka-share na ba ako?
Hindi pa, sir.
Sorry. Yep.
There we go.
Okay. Sige.
Doc Ed, if you could go to, there we go. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. Mabuhay po. My sharing is a study that we have conducted in the Visayas with the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities and CORD-AID. We focus our attention on the rising sea level, rising sea surface temperature, and ocean acidification. But in this regard, I'll be focusing more on rising sea level in the coastal and small island communities in the Visayas, particularly in the G1 Eastern Samar, that's located in Eastern Visayas, and in Bantayan Island, located in Central Visayas in Cebu. The purpose of doing that is trying to localize collection of data based on the local measurements at the community level and compare it with the satellite information given by various agencies doing global monitoring of sea level rise. So the objective is to examine the occurrence and impacts of SOE, the slow onset event, particularly focusing on sea level rise, but we also included the increasing sea surface temperature and acidification. And this is focused in coastal and small island areas in the Visayas. So what we did was to identify sites and the points of installation where we put up our instruments, for SLR measurements. The instrument that we use is a tide gauge that is actually manufactured at BSU that we use in the laboratory exercise. And then we also use the data that NAMRIA provided in their respective field stations in Eastern Visayas as well as in Central Visayas, and then substantiate this with the conduct of focus group discussion as well as key informant interview sessions. So our findings would say the in situ SLR observation in the small island of Hilantagaan, which is in Bantayan Island, shows us an increasing trend in the monthly mean tide height levels. And this is found to be consistent with the NOAA satellite observations and projections. There is a bit of difference probably because of the locations of observation points. The findings in Bantayan Island is a bit is an underestimate of compared to the NOAA estimates. While in Giwan, Eastern Samar, there is an increasing trend, the same thing, and it's also consistent with the global satellite observation and projection. Although the measurements based on our local data is a bit an overestimate compared with the satellite data or findings rather. So our findings in there, this is actual. The projected mean sea level is expected to worsen climate-related hazards, and this photo is taken in the small island of Hilantagaan in Bantayan Island in Cebu. So very evident of the intrusion of seawater and coastal erosion. So we found the occurrence of storm surges, coastal erosion, seawater intrusion, and flooding. The picture down below is taken in Giwan, one of the barangays or coastal barangays in Giwan, Eastern Samar. Some detailed observed impacts of SLR is the increasing vulnerability to storm surges and tsunamis in the small island and coastal communities, loss of habitable lands. You'll see that this area is indicating before as an upland area, as evidenced by a upland forest tree species in here. But because of the intrusion of seawater due to rising sea level, you see that the seawater is intruding even into the upland areas nowadays. And then there is resulting to loss of habitable lands. Of course, the clear and evident coastal erosion causing damages to coastal resorts and properties. And this is located in Bantayan Island, which is one of the famous tourism area in Cebu, Central Visayas. We found out the intrusion of salt water. This is in Barangay Campuyong in Giwan. We tested the water from in the wells, and we found out it's really there is evidence of salt water intrusion. There is also the evidence of flooding, damaging crops and residences, and then eventually causing loss of source of livelihood and income. So these policy implications and recommendations are based on the views of the local people in communities that we have gone through. And we just complement it with our knowledge or science. Reviewing policies, programs, and plans for coastal and small island development and management. Considering the sea level rise in the formulation of actionable policies, programs, and plans that is attuned and responsive to challenges of slow onset events. We have to review the 40-meter easement policy due to the landward advancement of coastal waters, effective local adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction plan and implementation. And then we have to do looking at modifying infrastructure and building guidelines, assessment of coastal area and zonification based on biological and physical characteristics, exposure to risk, and according to best and most suitable use. So I'm really complementing what Dr. Aliboyga said. Development and zonification must be local specific. And then reviewing and upgrading local relocation policies based on updated risk zone classification, policy and functional integration. This is very important, of various agencies and groups for adaptation and mitigation, and forming them into a working group for sea level rise. And then the conduct of continuous in situ observations of sea level rise, including the monitoring of coastal and marine biological diversity. With that, thank you for your attention. Salamat po.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ed. Thank you for giving us a clear and concise po your findings based on your studies done in the Visayas. Thank you so much. We'll call you again during the Q&A session, Dr. Ed. For our last but not the least speaker, she'll be talking about like case studies in Mindanao. And as mentioned po, she's also a member of the National Panel of Technical Experts. But aside from that, she is also a professor at the Department of Geodetic Engineering at Caraga State University. That's why may mga nanonood din po sa atin from Caraga State University. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Engineer Miriam Santillan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Armand. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our attendees in this forum. I titled my presentation, Beyond the Shoreline, Understanding the Impacts of Sea Level Rise on Coastal Land and Infrastructure. The results that I will be presenting in this forum is actually a result of our study that we conducted in Caraga region, Mindanao. So I think this has been repeatedly mentioned by our speakers that sea level rise is a gradual process that occurs over an extended period rather than happening overnight. It does not happen overnight. And it's a consequence of several complex factors, primarily, as mentioned by the previous speakers, primarily driven by climate change. Sea level rise has significant implications for coastal areas, especially low-lying areas globally. And it also leads to coastal erosion, to land loss. It was mentioned already that it can increase flooding and inundation, even saltwater intrusion into freshwater resources, even displacement of communities and ecological impacts on coastal ecosystems. The low-lying areas in the coastal regions are particularly vulnerable to these impacts. Now, it has been mentioned already. The loss of land, increased flooding, and contamination of freshwater resources will greatly affect our and will threaten human settlements, and including agriculture, infrastructure, and the biodiversity. To demonstrate the effect of sea level rise in coastal areas, we conducted a study in the islands of Dinagat, Bukas Grande, and Siargao Islands, where we examined and we quantified the land that will be inundated by the rising sea level, taking into consideration the different sea level scenarios. And we also taking into consideration also the topography of the area. So we also identified the numbers of infrastructures that will be inundated by different sea level rise scenarios. So the study was implemented by the Caraga Center for Geoinformatics of the Caraga State University through the GeoSafer Mindanao program with funding support from the OSTP Shared. And in this study, we utilized the Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar, or we call it IFSAR, Digital Elevation Model. It's a detailed topographic data from NAMRIA to map the potentially inundated areas and structures, considering various sea level rise scenarios. The point from 0.5, 1, 2, 3, up to 5 meters sea level rise. Now, the resulting inundation maps that we generated, actually, it generated valuable insights now as to the potential impacts of sea level rise in the three coastal islands. So this is some pictures of the Dinagat Island, Bukas Grande, and Siargao Islands, and they are located in the northeastern part of the Caraga region in Mindanao. And they are home to pristine white beaches. I think may nakapunta na doon, and they are very rich in coastal resources. The Actually, Siargao Island is also the home to the Los Contiguous mangrove forest in the Philippines, located in the municipality of Del Carmen. This mangrove forest was even nominated in the Ramsar Wetlands of International Importance list. But sad to say that all of these are threatened by the rising sea level. So after conducting a thorough analysis, we discovered significant results for each of the 3 islands. In the case of Bucas Grande, when we examined Bucas Grande, we found that if the sea level were to rise by 0.5 of a meter, around 7% of its total land area would be submerged or inundated. And this percentage would actually increase into 10% if the sea level rose by 5 meters. So this is for the Bucas Grande na case. And after examining the potential impact of various sea level rise scenarios in Bucas Grande, we also discovered that a significant percentage of structures in Bucas Grande, that's 24% of its total infrastructures, are at risk of being inundated. And this percentage increases to 42% in the event of a 5-meter sea level rise. So just imagine that 24% to 42% of the infrastructures present in Bucas Grande will be inundated if there is a 0.5 to 5-meter sea level rise. In the case of the Nagat Islands, on the other hand, demonstrated that approximately 6% of its total land area would be subject to inundation. In the scenario of 5-meter sea level rise, the affected land area would expand to 8.25%. So kung 0.5 meter yung sea level rise, 6% of the land area of Dinagat will be inundated. And it will increase to 8.25 kung maging 5 meters. Nung tiningnan ko, bakit medyo hindi naman ganun talaga kalaki yung effect in terms of land area that will be inundated. It's basically because of the topographic profile of Dinagat. Kasi most of the areas in Dinagat they have high elevations. But looking into the number of structures that will be inundated, this is alarming na. Kasi nung tiningnan namin, kung 0.5 meter lang ang sea level rise, 18% of the total infrastructure in Dinagat Islands will be inundated. And kung maging 5 meters naman siya, magiging 49%. Now, these statistics highlight the considerable danger that the Dinagat Islands are exposed to. And I think this would emphasize the urgency of implementing adaptation strategies to safeguard both the natural environment in Dinagat and also the built infrastructure. This is for Siargao Islands. Siargao Islands is particularly vulnerable to the effects of sea level rise, mainly because of its topographic profile. Relatively flat lang kasi si Siargao Islands. So even a 0.5 meter sea level rise would result in approximately 35% of the island's total area becoming inundated. Just imagine, just a 0.5 meter sea level rise, 35% of its total infrastructures will be inundated already in Siargao Islands. How much more kung naging 5 meters? Kung 5 meters na, 49% of the island infrastructure, in terms of land area, no, I'm sorry, I'm referring to the land area. So kung 0.5 meter ang sea level rise, 35% of the land area in Siargao will be inundated, and it will increase into 49% kung 5 meters na yung sea level rise. In the following slides, I will display maps of the flooded structures in Siargao Islands. I will just show here the maps for Siargao Islands because this one is yung parang nakita namin na very critical and alarming na yung result. So this particular map shows the potential flooding and exposure for a 0.5 meter scenario. So you can take note of the red colored structures here in the lower right portion of the map, as those are the ones that are at risk of being inundated. So this one is just a portion. This is located in Dapa, in the lower right portion. This is in Dapa. That's where the port is located. And then here sa upper right naman, this is General Luna. Nandito yung Cloud9, yung famous na surfing area in Siargao. And there are still a lot of, nandito din sa General Luna mostly ang mga resorts, no, sa Siargao. This slide naman, this map is for a 1 meter sea level rise scenario. The next one is for the 2 meter rise in sea level scenario. This is for the 3 meters, and this is for the 5 meters. So here is a map depicting the potential impact of the 5 meter sea level rise in Siargao Island. And it's evident that with each increase in sea level, a growing number of structures are at risk of being affected. So in summary of the structure exposure analysis that we did for Siargao Island, in the event of a 5 meter sea level rise, almost half of the land in Siargao would be submerged, leading to a devastating impact to 71% of the island structure. Yung nabanggit ko kanina na 49% of the land area of Siargao will be inundated. That corresponds to 71% of the structures, no, na magiging inundated then. Because most of the structures kasi, no, ng Siargao Islands are located near the shore. This, again, I would like to emphasize, underscores the pressing need for immediate and effective measures for adaptation and mitigation to mitigate the severe consequences on Siargao Islands. So for the convenience of everyone, I'd like to share with you that the findings of this study can be accessed online, and you can download it at no cost in case you are also interested of doing similar study in different area. You can go to myexcel.ccgr.info, and further there are in my Excel portal. It offers a range of reports and special data sets that you can find useful. And in case you are not from Caraga region and you are curious about the potential inundation of your area, kung mababahaan ba tong lugar namin, no, in the future due to rising sea level, you can access also the inundation maps created by NAMRIA. You can go to their portal, geoportal.gov.ph, so that you can select the area that you are interested, and you can request the data for free. They will email it to you. So the case study in the province of Dinagat Islands, Siargao Islands, and Bukas Grande Islands highlights the crucial importance of adapting proactive measures. So nabanggit na kanina no, na ano bang gagawin natin? Dapat proactive talaga yung measures na gagawin natin to address the impact of sea level rise in coastal zones. So ang tanong ngayon is, what can be done? Anong pwede natin gawin? Well, coastal communities can implement adaptation strategies such as etong coastal protection infrastructure as mentioned by Dr. Alibuyog, including the construction of seawalls and dikes to mitigate the impacts of rising sea level and reduce the coastal erosion. It will actually help in reducing also the erosion. Land use planning and zoning regulations can guide development away from high-risk areas. This was mentioned already, na very important ang ating land use planning and zoning. Why na, uso na ngayon ang futures thinking. So isipin natin 50 years and more from now what will happen, and do the planning and zoning considering the different scenarios. Enhancing community resilience through education. I would like to emphasize this, that this is very important, that to enhance the community resilience, we can do this really by starting educating them. And this forum is a very good venue, no, because the first thing that should be done is really acknowledging that sea level rise is really happening. And by that, we can do actions. We can do even mga awareness programs and social support networks that can help the communities. So by prioritizing adaptation efforts, the communities can work towards minimizing the risk and building a more resilient future in the face of this sea level rise. So in summary, the case study in the province of Dinagat Islands, Siargao, and Bukas Grande provides clear evidence, no? Hindi lang siya yung tipong, well, alam natin na may sea level rise, hindi kasi natin siya nakikita, no? Kasi nga sabi kanina, it's a slow onset event. So hindi natin siya ganun karamdam like the floods and the typhoons. But with what I have presented, it provides clear evidence of the possible impacts of sea level rise. And parang hindi na natin kailangang antayin na nandyan na bago tayo mag-act. Kasi itong, for example, building infrastructure, hindi siya ganun kabilis. It will take time and of course resources. So kailangan talaga siyang paghandaan. So in summary, I would just like to emphasize that it is really critical to take proactive measures to address the impacts of sea level rise in coastal zones. Research-based data, this one, I would like also to emphasize this one, that research-based data, including maps generated, is essential for developing effective adaptation strategies and mitigation plans. Para hindi yung, okay, dito malapit yung bahay ni certain politician, dito ako magtatayo ng dike. No, we should use research-based data and maps to identify yung saan ba yung dapat nating i-prioritize. Policymakers and stakeholders should prioritize tailored. I've seen a question kanina. Dapat ma-prioritize talaga yung tinatawag na tailored adaptation strategies to address yung specific na vulnerability of each island. And additionally, successful efforts require close collaboration between government agencies, local communities, scientists, and other stakeholders. This collaboration, I would like to emphasize, is crucial to ensure the long-term resilience and sustainability of these coastal regions. I think that ends my presentation. Dr. Raymond, back to you. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Engineer Miriam. Maraming salamat po. Very, very interesting and really appreciate yung sa may video, yung may mga gumagalaw pa and the diagrams that you presented po. Thank you so much. Very, very, very well presented po, all of our 4 speakers for today. So before we go into our Q&A session, we'd like to ask our panelists to please switch on your videos. And while you're doing that, we'll take a very quick break for a special public service announcement for today. TVUP. Okay, well, I think they're just setting up, but if we can have our PSA, thank you.
Kaloy, bilisan mo! Dali!
Wala! Ha? Ano nangyari? Ba't hindi kita makapitan?
Handa ka na ba, Kaloy?
Oo naman, ate! Nabakunahan na kami! May powers na kami laban sa inyo!
At hindi nyo na kami basta-bastang makakapitan! Yehey!
Sisiw!
Kaya mga bata, magpabakuna na kayo.
Stay safe and stay well. Mga bata, magpasama na sa Bakuna Center. Thank you so much, TVUP, the COVID Communication Public Service Announcement. Just one of the many, many outputs that we have at the Stop COVID team to push for pediatric vaccination for children age 5 and above. Please share this video clip with all of your social media accounts. Stay safe and stay well po. Magpasawa na po sa Bakuna Center. Okay, I'll start off the ball rolling with our first question for today. So this question comes in from one of our regulars. And very, very to the point, since just because we're discussing policies, will it be helpful that we have a vision and long-term solutions instead of just band-aid solutions with regards to that? And what are your thoughts about interagency efforts to date with regards to this one? We'll start off with Dr. Susie.
Oh, so definitely we need long-term thinking. So it starts with the thought, with the idea, no, na this is not something, it doesn't happen, sabi nga ni Miriam, it doesn't happen overnight. And therefore, the solution is also not overnight. So definitely long-term. Really, our challenge in the Philippines has always been our ability to follow through. No, parang maganda sa simula, tapos hindi na tinutuloy. Tapos pinapasukan ng politika. So I don't know what is the governance mechanism that can sustain over a period of time whatever it is that we want to do. No? So maybe we can think about some kind of a partnership that involves different agencies but the communities also. Kasi yung politiko nagbabago yun pero yung mga tao na nakatira doon, nandun talaga sila. So our colleagues have mentioned the importance of resilience of the community. I'm just reminded that when I was working in Japan, in Kobe, there was an earthquake museum. So there's an entire building that was dedicated to showing and educating the public about the 1994 Great Hanshin Awashi earthquake, no, where there was a lot of simulation. So you could see that if there's an earthquake again, where do you go, right? We should do the same thing for sea level rise. There should be a place or places in the country where young people, media, etc., can go to get data on their locality, and they can see, no, we can do this through technology, no, yung mga ginawa ni Miriam na mga predictive maps that should be available to everybody. So I think there is a way to do this, but it really requires leadership and strong commitment to do things in a different way. Hindi na pwede yung dati na DNR dito, ang dito naman sa kabila yung whatever agency, ang LGU dito. No, we have to think of a new way of doing this.
Okay,
I don't know if I answered the question, Raymond.
Yeah, very helpful, Dr. Susie. But I'd like to get also the opinion of we're first your co-chair, Dr. Ed, and then we'll call in Dr. Nathan and Engineer Miriam. Sir Ed, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I agree with building really a real working group, including the locals, because it's only the locals can really provide reality on the ground and then bring it to the upper level of decision makers. But again, there should be a real true partnerships that not only happens up above, but cascades down below in partnership with the local community. The research that we did is actually localizing, proving that local people in communities can provide scientific evidences, information, or data that are really collected in their respective areas. In fact, our projection of 2080 to 2025 sea level rise came from the local data that we have collected. So they have the potential, they have the capacity, but we have to enhance this and then provide support, particularly funding, the equipment that they need, the instruments that, simple instruments that they can use. And so they provide us. And then, translate it into something, what they want to happen in the national, at the national level. Ang problema kasi sa national level ng discussion, walang action na nangyayari na nakikita sa lugar o sa ground. And that's actually one of the concerns of the NPTE, transforming science policies into local actions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sir Ed. How about Dr. Nathan? Sir, I saw in your last slide you had a list of recommendations, but what are your thoughts about making sure that it's sustainable po from a policy angle?
I think sa akin is ano yan yung na-emphasize din kanina ni Ma'am Susie ito, no? So there's really a need for a long-term and long-term planning and talagang in-implement dahil kahit mag-change yung ating mga politicians, ay talagang they will really stick to the long-term plan para talagang yun yung ano niya, continuous yung ano natin, improving and addressing the real problem that were identified. So sana magkaroon tayo ng policy na talagang ano sa NEDA. I know that there's when I learned in college that there should be a 40-year planning actually noon na it should be continuous, but sad to say na from time to time nag-change din because of the advocacy or yung agenda ng kung sino man yung uupo dyan na. No? So may ano dyan is there could be some policies na talagang mandating all agencies to have a long-term plan, to have a long-term solutions din. Yan lang po.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nathan. And Engineer Miriam, your thoughts po with regards to policy and how to make it sustainable. Dagdagan ko lang po, no, there's a question in the chat that says, are your findings generalizable to the whole entire Philippines, or is it very site-specific po with regards to your island ecosystems mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raymond. I think dito sa question kung site-specific ba, in terms of numbers that I have presented and the percentages, it's site-specific. But as to the general effect of sea level rise to coastal regions, I think it was mentioned by the other presenters, and even the case for Visayas, they are also experiencing similar effects of sea level rise. With regards to the question on the policy and sustainability, I would agree with what Ma'am Susie mentioned, that really education is the key. Kung nagagawa ng ibang bansa na elementary years pa lang ng mga estudyante na i-educate na about earthquake, about climate change, so why not we do that in the Philippines? Maybe talk with DepEd to include a certain subject, or maybe just a topic on a certain subject for education purposes, para bata pa lang alam na nila that this is gonna happen in the future and we need to prepare for it. Kasi sabi ko nga kanina, nabanggit ko kanina na it's very important to acknowledge that sea level rise is really happening. Because by acknowledging that it is really happening, that's the only way that we can devise strategies for us to be able to adapt. And I think education really is the key. And also with regards to what Dr. Ed mentioned earlier, that there should be a technical working group dedicated to work on this matter, because I also have the same observation na maraming agencies ang involved, but I'm not sure if they are really having a parang comprehensive and cohesive analysis as to the effect and even consolidation of data. Maraming mga researchers ang nagsa-study about sea level rise, but where can we find those reports? So that we can come up with a analysis kung saan ba talagang province ang napakatindi yung effect ng sea level rise, and maybe the government can focus on that province. Kasi hindi naman tayo ganun kayaman na buong, as Ma'am Susie mentioned, we have the fourth largest longest coastline. So hindi sabay-sabay nating address yon. So we need to focus, we need to identify saan ba talaga yung pinaka-critical, and then focus on that first. So yun yung aking masabi, Dr. Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Engineer Miriam. Next question, and I think it's very, very tangential. If you saw in the chat, mayroong sumagot na po, someone who tried to answer this. Yung pong ating problems in the coastal areas as well as climate change, also tangentially maybe contributory doon yung ating paglaki ng population, and there are those na parang wala na silang matirahan and they prefer to go to the coastal areas, etc., etc. So how do these all connect? And the question here would be, to provide policies that provide greater access to family planning services that help address this and indirectly address din yung sa ating climate change problems. Dr. Susie.
Okay, that's one of my favorite topics. No, I'm a family planning advocate. Really, one of the biggest health problems of the Philippines is the population growth. Now, I heard that this has dropped recently. So, medyo ang growth natin ay mababa. Pero, malaki na talaga yung populasyon natin. I think, yes, services for family planning, but that we cannot ignore what is happening in the environment. No, so yung impact ng pag-control ng population, importante yon. Pero yung pinakita ko ang video kanina, importante din kung paano at saan natin nilalagay ang mga syudad. So we should actually not build any more communities in areas that are close to the coast. No, parang sa akin, it's simple eh. It's simple, but politically, it's very difficult because we have a lot of land. No? Maraming lupa ang Pilipinas eh. Pero hindi natin nadadala yung mga serbisyo na kailangan sa loob. So, sabi ko nga kanina, protect, accommodate, and retreat. We have to start retreating. Otherwise, this is existential. Hindi, parang mauubos tayo nito eh. No, so yes, to family planning, I agree that's a big challenge, but we cannot ignore what's happening in the environment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Susie. I have a phone-in question, but this is more, so I'll post this next to Dr. Nathan and then Dr. Ed and then Engineer Miriam. Ano po yung unique challenges faced by urban populations, including adequate infrastructure, and how they'd be able to adapt to climate change and protect human health? Yun po ang kanilang katanungan. Dr. Nathan, maybe you can answer it po.
So urban populations,
Yes po.
Ang nakikita ko kasi na one of the problems ay most of the cities are located actually dun sa coastal areas. Sabi nga yung literature is around more than 60% of our major cities in the Philippines is located in coastal areas wherein nandun yung threat. Of course, yung palagi kong sinasabi, we have the coastline. The Philippines is so blessed with a beautiful coastlines, a very long but because these are some opportunities, nandyan yung tourism, nandyan lahat yung mga opportunities na in terms of the socioeconomic impact sa atin. Kaya lang nandyan din yung threat. Kasama yan yung threat ng sea level rise, storm surge, tsunami and the like. Kaya yung natin sa urban, I think kasi nandun pa rin yung yung threat kahit nandyan lahat yung siguro economy wise they could afford, but nami-misplace po yung yung siting in terms of how we're going to really yung proper zoning natin. So if you go to Boracay for instance, okay, of course these are the rich people nandun, but these are very vulnerable to threats as sea level rise, storm surge, and tsunami. So no one is actually spared kapag nandun ka sa coast. So we really need to implement the zoning ordinance na nandyan tayo, because that's the only way that we could protect our communities, whether mayaman yan or mahirap. Thank you, Raymond. Yan yung take ko po.
Thank you, Dr. Nathan. This will be my last question to Dr. Ed and Engineer Miriam. And since you are both researchers and scientists po, question here is, meron daw po ang matututunan or something like lessons learned or something that we could apply from indigenous knowledge and traditional practices that could help promote climate resilient environments or systems and community-based adaptation strategies? Yun po ang kanilang katanungan. Sir Ed, Doc
Sige,
Ed.
salamat sa tanong. Thank you very much for that. I really have high respect to local knowledge or indigenous knowledge. I call it local knowledge because it's wider, no, in scope. Marami. In fact, they're doing science, but they don't know. It's only the time that we are in that they are able to, discover that they are doing science. But this would require harnessing from our part, being the more capacitated and the more knowledgeable, probably technically. Lots of them. For example, here in Baybay City, the locals have a good way of, producing resilient planting stock for mangrove restoration, which I was able to discover, and I have adapted it. No, for example, using a degradable potting material, which is actually goes into planting without removing anything, and so they establish a firm, resilient planted mangrove against strong winds, and then they also, I think they know a lot of things about what to do, but the only thing is wala lang parang spark na to really make them alive and then do things. They need an initiator, which for me should be coming from a knowledgeable scientist from the academy, especially not only local knowledge but also educating the political leaders. Because almost always, dagdagan ko lang kanina yung tanong na here in Baybay, for example, it's a political showcase rather than looking at the environment. It's a short-sighted, developmental activity rather than looking at the future of the environment, where the development is actually dependent on. So malaki yung local knowledge. I have a lot of things that I was able to discover in forestry alone. I have an article on local indigenous and local knowledge in forest development, and this has really helped me, in doing community development work, particularly in mangroves and forestry. Salamat po.
Very helpful, Doc Ed. Thank you so much. Engineer Miriam, your thoughts po, like from the Mindanao perspective po. Yeah.
Last 9 years or 10 years ago, Doc Raymond, we have this project funded by GIZ. The project is about documentation of IP practices for biodiversity. Doon ko nalaman na matagal na sila sa area. They live in floating houses along Agusan Marsh. This is in Agusan Marsh. And for several generations, ando doon na yung pamilya nila. So meaning, kaya nilang doon, no, na mabuhay talaga doon. And aside from that, may nabanggit na ni Doc Ed, the same, I also discovered mga unique na mga farming practices that is applicable. And what I'm trying to say is, it's very important to have this kind of documentation of local knowledge and local practices nationwide, hindi yung selected area lang, no? Para sa susunod na mga generations may makikita na reference pwede palang ganito. Now, going back to the concern kanina about sustainability, by the way, I would like to kasi nabanggit kanina na mauubos yung lupa natin, no, if we will just keep on retreating. Kaya nabanggit ni Doc Susie kanina, hindi lang naman pag-retreat ang pwede nating gawin. That's why there is protection, there is accommodation, no? And tsaka na yung retreat pag hindi na talaga kaya, kasi once retreat lang tayo ng retreat, mauubos yung lupa natin. And I would like to emphasize also the need for a review ng existing policy, because currently, tama, malaki naman ang Pilipinas, but most of our land are considered or classified as forest land or timberland. Hindi siya pwedeng gamitin ng tao, no? Not unless, so I think there is a need to really review the need for reclassifying that forest land, timberland into alienable and disposable land, given that there is already the need of additional land, because kailangan na nating ilikas, some of the critical areas, kailangan na nating i-retreat, no? But again, if we will just rely on the existing alienable and disposable land, magkakaroon talaga ng agawan ng available resources. So that's why the government should really take a proactive measure. Maybe review the classification of our land. Kasi malaking ang lupa natin but mostly are forest land. So hindi rin naman pwedeng maging ma-occupy ng mga tao because of its land classification. So the key really is to be proactive, hindi yung reactive tayo kasi heto na. So tsaka lang tayo gagalaw. So that would be really very difficult.
Okay, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you po for that excellent exchange of insights and really very, very helpful. You could see the emoticons po and the engagements dito po sa ating comment section ng ating Zoom. So maraming salamat po. We'd like to take this opportunity to go through the questions in our fun quiz before we move on to our last segment for the show. Okay, can we have it on the screen? Okay, sige po. Dr. Susie, what's the correct answer for question number 1? Is sea level rise in the Philippines higher or lower?
Higher talaga. All of anything that's on the equator belt, and that's us, right? It's higher. So the correct answer is higher.
Higher. Thank you so much. Question number 2, can we have it can we move it to the next question? Question number 2. Sea level rise is what?
Wait.
And anyone can answer po.
Can be slowed yung dito. But
Can
it
be slowed down.
reversed.
Okay. So 55% po of those who answered in Slido, and then 57%, medyo marami po ang nagsabi ng can be slowed down. The next is likely to be irreversible. For our third question, ano po ang porsyento ng Philippines, populasyon ng Pilipinas na nakatira along the coastlines? Kung kayo po ay nakikinig kanina, ang tamang pong kasagutan ay letter C. 70% of those who are in the Philippines po are living along the coastlines po. You will notice ito po sa Zoom, 57% po sumagot ng 70%, while in the Slido, it's 64%. Okay, so for our audience, thank you so much. I hope you were able to get the correct answers for our 3 questions and something to take away from our webinar for today. Right now, I'd like to ask each of our speakers to come up with their 1 minute, 30 seconds, or 1 minute message, final message to our audience po, something that you will want the audience to take away from this webinar. While you're doing that, while you're thinking of that, we will show on the screen our evaluation poll. Ito pong evaluation poll na ito, wala po kaming inilalabas na separate. Ito na po iyon. It's 5 questions, 4-point Likert scale, and we encourage everyone to answer the questions. So the questions are, the panelists demonstrated thorough knowledge of the topic. Number 2, the panelists were well prepared and organized. Number 3, the panelists spoke clearly and audibly. Number 4, the panelists used appropriate language with technical medical jargons adequately explained. And finally, number 5, the panelists contributed to new perspectives and knowledge on managing various key health issues. We will not be closing this until the end of the webinar as we move on to the final messages from our speakers. So ang uunahin po natin for the final messages, taga Mindanao po muna, Engineer Miriam Santellan.
Thank you, Doc Raymond. As my parting words, maybe I'll go back to the title of the forum and try to answer it. Kapag tumaas ba ang tubig, malulunod ba tayo? But I will not answer it literally. No? So, ang sagot ko dyan, if we will not do anything, that might happen. No? Pwede tayong malunod. That is why it's very important for us to first acknowledge the reality that the sea level rise, that the sea level is really rising. No? Acknowledge natin yan. And that's education and capability building. Because by acknowledging sea level rise through education and capability building, we will be able to swim. No? And I'm referring swimming as I'm referring to adaptation. matututo tayong mag-adapt. And with that, we can navigate into a safer direction. Guided, of course, by the data that is made available by the government and different agencies for reference, just like the inundation map that I have shown earlier. So again, let us use science to make informed decisions, especially with regards to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Dahil nga sabi ni Sec. Borge kanina, during his opening message, it is really very important to build climate-smart communities dahil buhay, kinabukasan, at kabuhayan yung nakasalalay dito. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Engineer Miriam Santillan, Professor at the Department of Genetic Engineering at Caraga State University, also a member of the NPTE. For the Visayas, Dr. Eduardo Mangawang, sir, from Visayas State University, your parting message.
Thank you. Siguro, pasalamatan ko ang UP for hosting this program. It's really my first time. It's a very unique opportunity to share also in this platform. Ang challenge ko lang is those who have the capacity, those who have the opportunity, let's try to put our feet on the ground, go to the vulnerable communities and do something, even in small ways that we can help, because the reality is saying they need our help. We scientists, academicians, government workers, let's get out, do our share, and help these vulnerable communities in our respective areas. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Sir Ed. That's the Dr. Ed Mangawang from Visayas State University, the co-chair of the National Panel of Technical Experts of the Climate Change Commission. Next up po, sa Luzon naman po, all the way sa Luzon, Dr. Nathan Abuyog po.
Okay, thank you, Raymond. So, ang aking siguro, yung aking takeaway message is we know that sea level rise is really a pressing issue that demands our attention and concerted efforts. So, it is a very important na talagang we need to tackle this, and with optimisms and determinations. We have already the knowledge, the technology, and the collective capacity to address the sea level rise. So what we need is to acknowledge the problem. We need to foster collaborations with other agencies in the Philippines. Sabi nga natin, we need to unite to implement a comprehensive strategies addressing this sea level rise issue. So let us remember that our actions today will shape the future. Together, we can build resilient communities, protect our vulnerable regions, and preserve the beauty and diversity of our coastlines. And finally, I could say, let us unite, inspire, and take decisive actions to tackle this sea level rise issue. Let's all create a sustainable and resilient communities for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Dr. Nathaniel Alibuyog, who's the Vice President for Research and Extension at Mariano Marcos State University, also a member of the NPT. Okay, finally, Dr. Susie Pineda Mercado, ano po ang inyong final message, ma'am?
Yeah, I think we have a problem because sea level rise is an invisible problem. So from a communications point of view, we have to create visibility. I think many people are not aware that this is a crisis for so many communities already. Parang emergency na siya sa ibang bahagi ng bansa. So there is a communication challenge, and I think putting our resources into good communication about this problem will have many benefits on climate action. Kasi problema sa sea level rise, it will impact on our water system. Teka, kailangan ko tuloy ng tubig eh. Need water. It will impact on the water supply of the country. And that impact is going to be very dangerous for public health. So I think we really have to communicate more, advocate now, and really show that this is a health crisis for so many people right now, not in the future, but right now. Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Susan Pineda Mercado, who's co-chair of the National Panel of Technical Experts Climate Change Commission. Okay, for our synthesis and closing remarks, we have none other than the head of the PGH Office of Extension and Research po, none other than Dr. Stella Marie Legazpi. Stella,
good afternoon, everyone. This is a very interesting and very relevant webinar that we had today from Dr. Susie Pineda Mercado. Her first sentence was already very stunning. The Philippine sea level rise 3 times, or about 2 feet, that of the global average. So what causes the sea level to rise? The first is fossil fuel. So when you gas up your car or your station wagon, the fossil fuel there affects the cryosphere, and this makes the temperature warmer, and so that we have the melting of the ice caps. Warm weather causes expansion of water. And so she also mentioned about the slow onset events, increasing temperature, desertification, loss of biodiversity, land and forest degradation. So that's very important. Glacial retreat, sea level rise, and ocean acidification. So these are all major events, and it's our duty to help conserve our environment. And we have 3 important and very knowledgeable speakers, Dr. Ed Mangawang, Dr. Nathaniel Alibuyog, and Engineer Miriam Santillan, who also mentioned all these events that are happening right now. And it is our duty to help preserve our environment, especially the rise in sea level. Back to you, Raymond.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Stella. Short but sweet. At since we're running out of time, maraming salamat din po. We could not have done this, and really very appreciative of the hard work also put in by the Secretariat of the Climate Change Commission. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat, and also to our National Panel of Technical Experts. As you will note, ito po ang unang-una sa mga policy forum po. So may mga kasunod pa po ito. Please stay tuned. I'm not sure if we'll be able to host all of these, but we encourage everyone. Sana po subaybayan nyo po ito pong policy forum series na ginagawa po ng Climate Change Commission. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take this opportunity na sana po makita-kita po tayo again. Next week, we'll be going back at the very least in terms of showcasing and highlighting po the work being done at the Philippine General Hospital. This time, next week po, it will be the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine who will be doing their own presentations and giving us like a lively discussion about the work that they had been doing. If we could have on the screen our evaluation poll, we'd appreciate it. I'm not sure if everyone has had the opportunity to answer it. There we go. But at least if I'm reading this correct, at least 90% of all of our participants really strongly agree po sa lahat ng mga statements, which is a testament po to our speakers and also to the topic at hand. At hindi nyo po naitatanong, we believe this is probably, I think, one of our top 3 or 4 webinars for the year. For Stop COVID Death. So maraming salamat po again to the National Panel of Technical Experts and the Climate Change Commission. But before we conclude our program, we'd like to remind everyone, lalo na po yung nakita ko po sa chat na nagtatanong, all Stop COVID Deaths webinars are archived for viewing at the TVUP YouTube channel. Ganun na rin po ang what we call our SCD Shorts. You just need to go to www.youtube.com/TVUPPH. So yun po, all 149 episodes and then today's episode, so maging 150. At ito pong mga shorts sa YouTube Shorts, meron din po kaming kasama po sa pakulo dito po sa aming SCD Shorts. Hopefully, you'll be able to watch this whether you're waiting for your coffee nga, or you're in your commute, or maybe planting trees on the weekend po, or taking your bike out. You'll be able to have this on the go ng mga maliit po. Ulitin ko lang po, it will be at youtube.com/TVUP Okay? So that wraps up our webinar for this week. Very, very interesting po, no? Not to say I'm biased, but it really is very interesting. Makita-kita po ulit tayo again next Friday from 12 noon to 2 p.m. It's a date.
Together, we can stop COVID deaths.
So keep safe, keep healthy, and see you online.